7th grade math, test 9 study guide, problem number 1. Factory worker can package 96 games in 12 minutes. That means over 12 minutes. What's the unit rate? So we go in and out, and 12 goes into that evenly 8 times, so it's 8 games per minute. Number 2, table below is proportional. They want you to find the number of milliliters of water for every 1 milliliter of milk. So that's a unit rate because it's per 1. So in other words, they said milk second, so milk goes on the bottom. They say water first, milk second, milk goes on the bottom. The directions say write it as a fraction. So this time we're not going to divide in and out to get a decimal. Instead, we're going to do our factor trees. This is 9 times 3, correct? Here's 9 times 3. Cross out your 1's, and you have a reduced answer. 5/9 is the answer. So it's 5/9 milliliters of water for every single milliliter of milk. Okay? Now sometimes they have us divide that. This time they didn't. Number 3. Tony and Tiffany collect stones. Tiffany is $24 for 9 cents. Excuse me, $24 for 9 pounds. Tony is $17 for 5. So which one of these has the better buy? That means find the unit rate again. So I go in and out, I divide. Whoops, I got 24 divided by 9. And 24 divided by 9 is going to be 2 point something. But you know what? I'm going to stop there because that might be enough. I'll go over here. 17 divided by 5. That's going to be 3 point something. I know this is more, this is less. Now, if they're both 2's, I'd keep going. But I can save time if I see they're different. So Tiffany is obviously paying less. Tiffany has the better buy. Alright, so number 4 says, which of the following ratios forms a proportion with 2/3? So we're going to test one. First one is 4/9. If this is proportional, then what's true is cross products will be the same. Also what's true is if I multiply this by 2, I got to multiply this by 2 also. That's also true for proportions. So since I multiply this by 2 to get that, I don't multiply this by 2 to get 9, so that doesn't work. So A doesn't work. Let's try B. I have 2/3 for B. Is that proportional, or does that make a proportion with 14/21? Well, are these equivalent? I multiply this by 7, I multiply this by 7, there's my answer. And C and D won't work just like A didn't work. Number 5. 5 says, I'll go up here for 5. 5 says, turn this light on. A van travels 280 miles. On, that means over 14 gallons. At that rate, how much gas will it need to travel 520 miles? So we got miles on top. I'll put miles on top. How many gallons? Gallons on bottom. Cross multiply. 280 times x is 280x. 520 times 14 is, sorry about that interruption there. 520 times 14. When you multiply those two, you should line these up better than I did. But we will get 7,280. I divide both sides by the coefficient, the number in front. And it should be 280 there. And I divide these here. Now, I can cross out these zeros when I have zeros on the end and I'm dividing. So I can just divide 728 by 28. 728 divided by 28. That's going to give me an even 26. So it goes in evenly. The answer is 26 gallons. Number 6 says you have a ratio of girls to boys. So these are girls and these are boys. 1 to 3. How many girls are there for a total of 350 boys and girls? So they're talking about girls total. So I got to add these two to get the total. So 1 girl to 3 boys mean 1 girl to a total of 4 boys and girls. So they say how many girls? So I got girls on top. So I go x over here. Excuse me, 1 over 4 and x over this. And then let's see, we have 350 total. So I got girls on top, total on bottom, girls on top, total on bottom. I cross multiply to solve this proportion. Divide both sides by 4. And when I divide this, this is not going to go evenly, so I'll go ahead and show you how to do this. I'll go in and out. So I start out with an 8. 9 would be too big, 7 would be too small. I know that because when I subtracted these two, this difference would be more than my divisor. So since 3 is not more than 4, I know I used the right number. Drop one number down. 7 goes into that 28 times. The difference is 2. Now this is where I can put a decimal, because I got to round to the nearest whole number, right? The nearest whole girl. You don't want part of a girl, right? So you got to round to the nearest whole girl. So I drop into 0 down here. 87.5, well that's about 88 girls total. Okay, so we are now on number 7. Let's go up here to number 7. Alright, fix this here. Number 7 says, in 4 hours, the fish swam 140 miles. So we got 140 miles per 4 hours. I always put the time on the bottom, right? Unless they tell me otherwise, like unless they mix the directions up like I did in number 2, then time's always in the bottom, right? Money's always on top, time's always on the bottom, unless they tell us otherwise. So 140 miles per 4 hours. How many total hours? So we're missing hours, so I'll put X here because I got hours on the bottom. I keep hours on the bottom. If the fish swam an additional, so that word additional means I have to add 150 onto this, so I add 150 onto that and I get 290 miles. Okay, so now I'm going to cross multiply 140, and let's solve this proportion. 140 times x is 140x, and when I multiply 290 times 4, and we'll get 1,160. I divide these two. Okay, and now remember, when you're dividing, you have zeros, and then you can cross those out. So now I'm dividing 116 by 14, and that won't go in evenly, so I'll show the work on that. So 14 goes into 116 8 times. 9 would be too big, 7 would be too small. I multiply those two, I get 112. I can put my decimal now. I'm at the end. I subtract, add a 0. 14 goes into that 2 times, which is 28. And that might not work. So let me subtract and check. Oh, see, my difference is smaller than my divisor, so it did work. Add another 0 down there. Sorry, I'm getting messy here. Need some space here. So the direction said round to the nearest tenths. So I'm going to go to the nearest hundredths. Tenths is here, so if I'm rounding to there, I have to go one more. So 14 goes into that about 8 times. Remember we did that earlier? 8 times that goes into that. So 8.28, that is about 8.3 if I'm rounding to the nearest tenths. 8.3. It says, what are we finding here? How many total hours? That's 8.3 hours. It's about 8.3 hours. Problem number 8 says find the constant rate of change. Alright, so remember, money on top. So they give us this table right here. Money on top, I got, just pick one. If it's constant, it's proportional, so I'll just put 58 over 4. I'll put $58 in 4 hours. And if they want to know the rate, usually we divide these two, and they most likely put it in a decimal, unless they say this. This time I said this just to make you be okay with it. This time I want a fraction. So what that means is I'm going to reduce this. So, whoops, did I do this incorrectly? Yep, I did this wrong. I'm sorry about that. Money's on top. Wait a minute. No, I did do it right. Here, number 8. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. I did do it right. I was wrong about being wrong. Go figure. Got 58 on the top, 4 on the bottom. Okay, 58 is going to be 2 times 29. And I know that because it's even, right? So I know 2 goes into it, so I go over here and divide 58 by 2 to get 29. On the bottom, I have 4, which is 2 times 2. Cross out my 1s. Like I say, normally we divide and get a decimal, but this time the direction said leave it as a fraction. That means improper fraction reduced. 29 halves dollars per hour. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. I just want you guys to be okay with improper fractions as well. So that's why I left the directions that way this time. So Juan earns $11 per hour at his job. Which ordered pair would not appear? So if we look at all these fractions here, if it's $11 per hour, where am I at? There we go. If it's $11 per hour, I want you to think about that. Per 1 hour, that's a unit rate. And if he's not working at all, he'd make no money. So this is proportional, right? 0, 0 means $0 for 0 hours. And it's the same constant rate of change. So it's proportional. When it's proportional, all I got to do is take any of these y's over x's, and I should get 11. So 55 over 5 is 11, 33 over 3 is 11, 11 over 1 is 11. But 22 over 4, that's not 11. So if I take A, 22 over 4, I don't get that $11 per hour. It does not equal that. So my answer, the one that doesn't work, is A. That will not be true. So that's the one I pick. Which value, number 10, would complete the table? So they say it's proportional, so it doesn't matter which of these coordinates I use right here. They're all going to be the same when I put y over x. So I'll take the first one. And when the one that's missing, we're missing the y this time. Sometimes it could be possible that we could be missing the x, but since we're missing the y, I'll put the variable there, and then we have the x for that point. Okay, so I have my proportion there. So I'm going to cross multiply. I go 3 times 21.9. So I go off to the side, right? I pretend there are no decimals, and I go 3 times 219 would be 657 with 1 decimal point. So I go from right to left and add this decimal point back in. And 1 times y is just y. Great, I don't have to divide that time. Y is already isolated. I know the missing value. I solve this. And so number 10, the answer should be 65.7. So that's what would go right here if this were proportional, 65.7. Alright, number 11. Let's go back up here to number 11. 11 says write the equation. Now, I see this is proportional because it's a line that goes to the origin, so I take any set of coordinates. See, I go over 2 and up 30, over 2 up 30, or I can use any of those. They're all going to give me the same thing, but I got 230. I put y over x, rise over run, and that gives me 15. So since it's proportional, the vertical axis is m, horizontal axis is s, so I go m equals 15s. Done. Which means the meters of the distance equals 15 meters per second times each second. Number 12. 12 says if someone scored 20 out of 30 on a test, what was their grade? So 20 is the part, 30 is the whole. We want to know percent, so I put x over 100. Solve this proportion, cross multiply. 20 times 100 is 20 with 2 zeros. 30 times x is 30 in front of x. Divide by 30. Cross out those zeros, and I'm dividing 200 by 30, so I go in and out. That's what division is all about. So I divide those two. Okay, and I go, let's see here. 3 doesn't go into that 7 times. Let me make sure you guys can see this. So it goes in 6 times. That's 18. Okay, bring this down. Goes 6 again. Can put my decimal. 18. Oh, it's going to keep repeating, so it's going to be repeating 6's forever. So if I'm rounding to the nearest percent, that's about 67%. 67% is a D. Alrighty. Hopefully you guys scored better than that on your last test. Number 13 says this. 13 says, what number is 14%? So I always put percent over 100, right? What number is 14% of 70? So it's is over of, right? I got the of. I put that on the bottom. Let's multiply these. 100 times x is 100x. We got 70 times 14. 70 times 14. I'll show that in case you guys are having some issues with the multiplication. 4 times that is 280. Remember, you skip a space here, and then 1 times 7 is just 70. Just make sure you line these up. And when you add all this up, you get 980. So I cross multiply these two here, and I get 980. Now, dividing by 100 is nice and easy. I moved the decimal 2 times to make it smaller. I got 9.8. Sweet. 9.8 is the answer, number 14. 14 says 24 is 40% of what number? Is over of, right? 24 I have is. It is 14% of what? So I don't have that total. I always have 100%. Percent means out of 100 by definition. I multiply, cross multiply, and divide. 24 times 100 is 24 with 2 zeros. 14 times x, put the number first, 14x. Divide both sides by the coefficient, the number in front of the x. Okay, so my answer will be this. I can't cross out those zeros this time, right? Because there's no zero at the end of 14. I got 2,400 divided by 14. We're still on 14 here. 2,400 divided by 14. For number 14, let's see, I did something wrong. Oh, yes, I did. Oh, my land. I'm sorry, you guys. I got 14% from number 13. My bad. Please excuse. Yeah, it's not supposed to be 14%. You're probably going, what is Mr. Carbajal doing? And I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm running on not enough coffee right now. So I needed to, 14 is right next to it. I needed to use 40%. Sorry about that. Let's do number 14 again. It's going to be 24 is 40%. I thought something was wrong. Something didn't feel right. Now I cross multiply. I should get a 40 there instead of a 14. Okay? And now I can cross out those zeros. And I go, that's going to be 6 times that is 60. Okay? Sorry about the confusion there. And let me check my answer here, make sure I didn't make another mistake. Yep, it's good, 60. Okay, good. So now when you guys are taking a test and you make a mistake like I did right there, that's why we check. That's what's nice about having those multiple choice answers. Okay, you should look and see your answer. I don't try to put, if they do this wrong, then they'll get this answer, so let me put that on there. I don't try to usually do that. But every now and then I'll use questions from the test generator. I won't write it myself, and that's possible that could happen. But most of the time, you should see your answer if you did it right. Okay, number 15. 8th grade boys eats 1,800 calories to 2,600 calories per day. 5% of those calories are on sweets. 5% are on sweets. Oh, very bad for you. Very bad. And the question is, how many would 3 teenage boys eat per day? Correct, I think. Let me check. We're on number 15. Yep, for 3 boys. So, well, if it's 10 or 5, that's nice, because 10%, I know we talked about this in class. If you're finding 10% of something, just take off a decimal. 10% of 1,800 is 180, right? 5% is just half of that. So I got 90 to 130. Then I'm just cutting this in half. Times 3 for each of these gives me my answer, 270 to 390 calories per day. Alright, if this said 7%, now I wouldn't do it that way. I would just write proportions. I will teach you that when the time comes, when it gets a little more complicated. Alright, so we're on 16 now, moving right along. Number 16, we have a company raised the price of an item. It was $120. It went to $156. Okay, so it looks like it went up, what, $36? So if it went up $36, we want to know the percent of increase. We want to know 36 is what percent of the original. So subtract the 2, put that over the original. Again, subtract the 2, put that over the original. Cross multiply and divide like we always do. Okay, see those zeros, hit those. X goes into that, what's that, 30 times? Yep, 30 times. Number 17. So it's a 30% increase. Number 17 says, at that time there were 61 people, then it went down to 41 people. That's a change of 20. What's the percent of decrease? So since it's going down, it's the same exact thing. The only difference is it's going down. We still put subtract the 2 over the original. Still the same steps. Multiplying by 100 is just adding 2 zeros. This division gets a little nasty, so I'll go and show this off to the side over here. So I'm going to divide these two. Alright, so I got 2,000 in and 61 out. Okay, so 61 goes into 203 times, which is 183. Subtract those two. That's a difference of 170. Wait, it's a difference of 17. Difference of 17. Drop down to 0 gives me 170. Okay, so, regroup, borrow, you get 17. Drop a 0 down. Okay, so that's what you should have got there. Now, 61 into 170. 61 goes into 172 times. If I double 61, I get 122. Subtract those two. Sweet, I'm going to run out of room. So I subtract those two, I get 48. I'm at the end here, right? So I can put a decimal so I can add as many zeros as I need. Okay, so now how many times does 61 go into 480? 61 goes into 480 about 7 times, so I'll just, you run out of space, you bring it up here. Okay, we got 480. I go 7 times 61. 7 times 61 is 427. Subtract those two. I got a difference of 53. Can add another 0, drop it down. 7 goes into 61 goes into 530. How many times? I think that's about 8 times. So I put an 8 right there. Let's keep track of where you're at. 8 times 61 is going to be 488. Now, the direction said round to the nearest hundredths, otherwise I would have stopped right there. Okay, if I'm rounding to the nearest hundredths, I have to go one more. Here's hundredths, you have to go one more to round. So I subtract these two, I get 42, can add another 0, drop it down. That goes in about 6 times, that's enough to round. So this is about 32 and 79%, rounding to the nearest percent. Not very nice. I actually got this one from the test generator, otherwise I would have just had you round to the nearest percent, but, you know, sometimes you see this stuff, so we got to deal with it. Alright. Okay, so where are we at now? We're on 18. 18 says this. You bought an item, 8% tax. This added $11.60 to the price. What was the original price? So in other words, $11.60 is 8% of what number? That's that question. That's all they're asking you. So we cross multiply. Multiplying by 100 means move the decimal 2 times. Divide by 8. Okay. So we got $11.60 divided by 8. It goes in evenly. $145 was the original price. 19 says you bought an item for 8%. 8%. The original price was $100. How much did you actually pay? So there's two ways you can do this. You can find 8% of is over of, right? Of 100, so 100 to go on the bottom, is over of, which is going to be $8, and then add that on to the original. Or if they're asking what's the price including tax, they're really asking you to find 100% or the whole thing plus 8%, or 108%. So if they're saying what's the new price, just you can add the percent onto 100 and just do, instead of doing 2 steps, just do it in one. You can just find 108%. 2 ways to do it. You multiply by 100, add 2 zeros, divide by 100, just move the decimal 2 times, and $108 is the answer. Okay. And lastly, number 20, we've got x over, this is how you set up number 20. Okay. It's because they said they're going to take off 80%, so you're only finding 20%. Okay, so we cross multiply here. Cross multiply, and whoops, sorry, this is messy, and then divide by 100, and we get $20.40. Sorry, I had to rush on the last one. Class is going to start. Hope that helped.